Today on r/AskReddit, what moment made you think yup, I'm dead, but you survived? I was 11. I had just developed asthma and my mother refused to quit chain smoking in the house. One night I have a severe attack. I'm trying to use my rescue inhaler and it's not working. Each time I try to inhale it just goes right out my nose. I panic. I vividly remember my mother smoking a cigarette as the panic is giving way to hypoxia. She's screaming at me to use my inhaler. Right before losing consciousness, I realized that was it. I'm dead. There wasn't a whole lot of life to flash before my eyes. A sense of calm and peace settled over me as I collapsed. My parents did CPR on me until the paramedics arrived. I woke up in ICU days later with a tube down my throat. The doctors were surprised I survived. My mother never smoked in the house again after that. The car was still fair game for her though. I cannot imagine doing that to my kid. My grandma developed COPD and my mum just about quit smoking at all, much less in the house. Yeah? My grandma was a smoker and developed COPD. She quit cold turkey. About a month in, at a family event after most people had left, she asked anybody to blow smoke in her face just once for the smell. Somebody actually did it. And her body was not having it. Luckily the event was across from a fire department. The garage door hadn't even closed before they had oxygen on her. I was choking on food, almost a full blockage, and couldn't get any air in. After several attempts to get it out, it sunk in that it was really lodged in my throat, and I was screwed. Started to feel dizzy and everything moved slowly. I remember thinking what an embarrassing way to die. And that I didn't want my kid to be watching. It was at breakfast. I started dialing 911, when my husband came up behind me and started first aid. He got the blockage out and I started vomiting everywhere. It was very intense. I still went to get checked by a doctor to make sure my lungs were clear because I felt dizzy for hours after, and my throat was raw. Took a day or so to heal. He 100% saved my life. I once choked on food at a restaurant, as a child with my mum and family friends. My mum panicked and tried to lift me upside down, hitting my head on the table on the way down. This method surprisingly didn't work. One of the friends ended up just reaching into my mouth and pulling the piece of calamari out of my throat, which did work. When I was a 6th grader I was cutting plastic with a box cutter knife. Slipped and sliced a 6-inch long and half-inch deep cut into my wrist, cut almost every vein and the tendon some people have. My first thought was oh shit I'm bleeding, followed by me running to the bathroom and then slipping on the blood and smacking my head of the floor, knocked out and somehow lived. Hey, I did the same thing but when I was 21, 24 now. But I was at work cutting a zip tie to a tote and it went straight into the base of my thumb and out the other side. I didn't notice I stabbed the base of my thumb because I pulled it out fast and was looking up at something on the shelf. My coworker actually pointed out I was bleeding and I looked down and noticed I accidentally stabbed myself. Apparently I cut 3 veins on the left side of my hand and I ran to the bathroom and was wondering why it didn't hurt and applied pressure and then it started to hurt. Some old guy came into the bathroom with a first aid kit and said he was a combat medic in Iraq. He told me it was gonna sting like shit and burn like hell when he was going to clean the wound and wrap it up. I told him to just do it and if I pass out to make sure I make it to the hospital. I did feel dizzy as fuck from blood loss and the rate my heart was beating from panicking. I had to get 9 stitches, 6 where the entry was and 3 where the exit was. Car accident. We hit a patch of ice and went over a guardrail and off a 40-foot cliff. I knew was dead the moment I pulled my leg free from the piece of door stabbing through it and the blood came out like a faucet. I figured I could at least climb back to the road for help before I passed out, so I did. I flagged down a passing truck and passed out and died in the ambulance before they brought me back. The firefighters used my blood trail to find my friend's car which saved his life. So mission accomplished. I didn't die, but I thought I did when a semi-truck ran over the front of my friend's Geo Metro. I barely saw it coming and said oh fuck. Until that moment we were singing Justin Timberlake songs. I woke up in what I thought was my bed, an airbag, and I couldn't breathe. People were at the window talking, but I didn't understand them. I couldn't figure out how I was looking out a car window from my bed. I realized I had been in an accident and I dislodged my knee from between the door and dash. My friend asked if I was okay. His face was covered in blood because his head hit the windshield. I shook my head no because I couldn't breathe. I crawled out of the door, no idea how it opened, and across the street. Nobody knew I couldn't breathe, so I just figured I would die for the second time. I curled in a ball and suddenly something clicked and I took a breath. Sounds began to come into focus. Some guy with a broken Slavic accent was asking if he could have the rims off the car. I was dumbfounded. House explosion, 3 years old Edmonton. A.B. I vividly remember standing next to a stove that someone was fixing in the basement apartment of my dad's friend's house, who we were visiting, and next thing I was opening my eyes in the daylight outside. I completely blacked out while the gas stove exploded and I landed clean in the driveway. My dad and mom were on the front page of the Edmonton Journal 1993. I remember distinctly thinking the brightness was heaven and that I had died and fell into heaven. My baby sister had died several weeks prior to SIDS and my mother and father had to explain where she had gone and I thought I was in heaven but it was the sky. Had a car crash into my house and hit me when I was a child. I was sitting on the couch at the time and it hit me, drove through the next wall into the garage, then came to rest on top of my lap, pinning me down to the couch with its full weight. I won't go into too much detail about my injuries, suffice it to say that it was pretty gory. It took over an hour for the emergency responders to get me out from underneath it. That hour is foggy at best. I remember so much pain, and at some point I felt this overwhelming sense of peace about the situation. Like, I instinctually knew that all I had to do was let go and the pain would stop. I started to let go, and I began slipping away. The pain stopped, the world slowed, and everything started to fade to black. It felt like I was floating on water, and all the fear and agony was taken far away from me. I snapped back into myself to the sound of a firefighter yelling at me to stay awake. Immediately the pain returned and I was fully here again. Didn't hit me until much later in life that I was interrupted in the middle of the death process. I'm so happy to hear that you made it through that ordeal and are still with us in the land of the living. How was the recovery process, and how are you doing now? Honestly, the recovery process was weird. I was a child when it happened, but even then I was super stubborn. The worst injury was a severely fractured femur, thigh bone. The surgeons installed a plate, but didn't have any hopes really. My leg was completely purple after surgery, and they were worried that if my circulation didn't improve, that they would have to amputate. Even in the best case scenario, none of them thought I would ever walk again. But the human body is an incredible design. Because of my age, my body responded to the trauma by starting puberty early. The growth spurt enabled my body to regrow the bone and I started walking again not long after. I enjoyed the looks on those doctors' faces whenever I was able to walk into follow-up appointments after they had condemned me to life in a wheelchair. That said, not everything goes back to normal. I still have a load of scars, and while the circulation in my leg improved, sparing me amputation, I did suffer some pretty significant nerve damage. A good portion of that healed over time, but I still have large areas on my leg that I just can't feel. And nerve pain is the worst. The whole event was over 16 years ago and I can now do everything a normal person can do. Side effects include nerve pain attacks, and joint discomfort when there is an approaching storm. I never forgot that death was a conscious process that I began, so I am thoroughly convinced that existence doesn't end there, it just changes. I was a director of one of the largest museums in the United States and walked out on stage to give a pretty controversial presentation. I was already pretty nervous. There's a loud bang from the center of my head. I don't feel my body drop, but I can tell I've hit the floor. My vision blurs and turns red, and in the 3 seconds after the bang, I come to the conclusion that I've been shot and have seconds to live. I'm a very large man, and as I'm fading out, I see my friend, the 90 pounds 40 kilograms, museum nurse trying to pull me up. I was in shock and the pain didn't really faze me, but damn did it hurt. Indescribable agony that in just 2 seconds made death seem like mercy. I accepted very calmly that my nurse friend's face was the last thing I'd ever see and faded out. I got to die a dramatic death and lived to tell about it. I woke up 4 hours later in a hospital after an emergency surgery. I hadn't been shot after all. I somehow had an abscessed wisdom tooth that had become highly infected, and the abscess exploded upwards into my head, splitting the tooth from tip to jaw and breaking my left maxilla. It erupted with such force that my eyes bled and the pain knocked me out. While I was out, my wisdom tooth was pulled without anesthetic and the infection drained. I get phantom twitches just thinking about it. Edit. Wow, I didn't expect such an explosive response. Badamtis. To answer everyone's questions, yes, I had had a toothache for a few days and had an appointment for 2 days later to have it checked out. I had been soothing it with toothache mouthwash pretty effectively. I am an evolutionary biologist, and the presentation was about accepting certain facets of the science of evolution in order to move forward in the global bank of medical knowledge. This may seem pretty duh to most of you, but our museum is in the South, in a county where 70% of residents don't believe in evolution or climate change. It was pretty hot button. Not very many people knew it was possible, including some of the medical professionals I worked with afterwards to repair my face. They all said it was an absolute freak incident that had to have precisely perfect conditions to occur. Yes, I do have a bit of post-traumatic stress concerning it. I go to the dentist at least 6 times a year now, and I have considered having all of my teeth removed on multiple occasions. I get little twitches from where nerves were cut on occasion and my heart sinks. I wince and sometimes cry or whimper. Not from pain, but just the fear that it's happening again. I don't eat any foods that may cause tooth decay or pain, which has honestly been great for my health overall. Thanks for checking in. I was investigating a fire out in the middle of nowhere. Was a single wide trailer with a brick house built around it, which, if you don't know, trailers burn like a torch and the brick means all the heat stayed inside, making everything extremely unstable. I was walking through taking my photos and accidentally stepped on a part of the roof that was somehow still attached to the brick wall that was still standing. The entire brick wall then fell on top of me and buried me. It hurt like a son of a bitch. I don't know if you know what a brick wall falling on you feels like, but everything hurts, everywhere. I laid there under the bricks for probably 5 or 6 minutes trying to figure out just how injured I was, if anything was broken, and if I was going to lay there until I died because I had no cell service and no one was going to see me if I couldn't get myself unburied. I'm in the middle of a completely burned building miles away from anywhere, buried under a brick wall. I, thankfully, only had scratches and bruises and managed to dig myself out after a good while. But good Lord, was I sore for a while. I was kidnapped. A guy approached me at a gas station in the middle of the night. I has just gotten off work, and asked for a ride. I said no, obviously, and he pulled out a massive knife and insisted. Of course I agreed at that point because I wasn't trying to get stabbed, and asked where he wanted to go. He directed me to a sketchy motel in the bad part of town, holding the knife on me the whole way. As we were pulling into the parking lot, I thought for sure this was how I was going to die. He got out of the car first, and suddenly 2 guys came out of nowhere like fucking crackhead guardian angels, and jumped the guy who had kidnapped me. From the little I heard, he must have owed them money. I didn't stick around to find out. I hauled ass out of that parking lot with the passenger door of my car wide open. I still can't believe I lived through that. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have you ever had a near-death experience? If so, what happened? Tell us about it in the comments below. I sure am glad you're still here with us. As always, please be sure to smash the like button, share the video, and ring the bell so you never miss another installment. Until next time, stay curious friends, and thank you for tuning in.